Thank you so much, everybody, and welcome to Neurodivergent Nook, a new podcast, first episode, helping and supporting neurodivergent people everywhere. So just to introduce myself first, and then I'll pass on to Diane here. My name is Helen Neal. I'm a therapist, and I'm also autistic ADHD and a parent to neurodivergent children. And we are hoping to be able to shed some light on all things neurodivergence
Hopefully.
Together. So that's me. Over to Diane.
Hey, hi everybody. My name's Diane Franer. I'm also autistic and ADHD. I have 3 children, 2 of whom are neurodivergent. Also a foster carer to neurodivergent teenagers, mostly boys. And my kind of career experience is teaching and having been a head teacher and a Senko. And now I'm a consultant in schools and also do mentoring and coaching for one-to-one neurodivergent teenagers.
Yeah. So we've got a wide range of experiences covering everything from lived experience to parenting to therapy and pretty much everything else in between. The whole education, mental health, the lots. Yeah. So hopefully we are going to be able to help people. That's the point.
Yeah.
And the first episode, we're going to chat about rejection-sensitive dysphoria.
For sure.
And I'm, as an autistic ADHD, I experience this clearly. But I think sometimes it's hard to actually pinpoint what it is. So I don't know, Diane, what's the experience for you?
Yeah, I think having only been diagnosed with autism last year, age 51, and ADHD, age 50, I think I probably spent most of my life just thinking that I was massively oversensitive. I didn't know why I felt that, friends at school and college and university weren't understanding me and why they always, why they thought I was kind of maybe a bit over dramatic or over emotional. And I never kind of really got and understood why other people didn't feel that way. So alongside kind of that always knowing I was different kind of bit that we all sort of think as late diagnosed adults, I think I was just really hard on myself and I didn't understand why, a situation would be so painful for me, kind of emotionally and physically. Whereas other people were like, oh, well, yeah, I'm kind of over that now. That was yesterday. And I kind of felt knee deep in trauma for something that would, last weeks and weeks. That was a bit that I struggled with.
So when you were talking about that, and I know I kind of really resonate with that idea of the physical pain.
Absolutely.
And and you can feel it, can't you? And there's that tightness in the chest, and I do remember a friend of mine talking about like it's like daggers.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's almost instantaneous as well.
And to try and explain that to somebody that you're hurting physically because somebody might have said the wrong thing to you a week ago just seems, it kind of seems crazy, doesn't it? I think to other people, or I feel that they think it's a crazy reaction.
And I suppose actually one of the things that has helped me, and maybe this resonates with you guys as well as you, is actually having a name for it and an understanding that actually this is the experience I'm having, and it's not as unusual perhaps as I thought it might be.
Definitely. And I think, normalizing things for us neurodivergent people is helpful, isn't it? Because we spent so much of our life and so many of our years feeling different and feeling awkward and feeling that we don't fit in. And I think knowing that RSD is that, it just kind of brings a bit of calm to the chaos in your head about it, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, and a little bit of acceptance too.
Yeah, I guess. For sure. I remember when, before one of my own children was diagnosed with ADHD, and we kind of weren't sure, what was going on. And even as a child, she was so hurt, that like we're talking about that physical pain, And oh yeah, isn't she emotionally intelligent? Isn't she really aware of her emotions? Before actually realizing what she was actually struggling with was RSD and still is. Yeah, so I think it's not to be underestimated really how much that can impact you on you, whether you are a child or an adult.
Yeah.
And even if you know about it, doesn't mean that it stops happening, does it? Or you don't stop having those feelings.
It does help to notice it, I think.
Yeah.
That actually that's the experience you might be having.
Yeah.
And something that's helped me massively is this idea that it might not be rejection. It might not be criticism.
Yes.
It's I'm perceiving it as.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not, I'm not criticizing myself or anyone else, but that is the acknowledgement that sometimes we perceive a rejection where actually there isn't one.
Yeah.
Sometimes we perceive a rejection and there is.
Yeah.
So no minimization about when that is actually what's happening.
Yeah.
But it does no harm, I think, sometimes to question.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's why it's important to have your support network, isn't it? Even if it's one other person, your partner or a friend, or whether that's a wider group of people. So you can say, gosh, do you really think I was over, how do you think I reacted to that situation? Or for them to sometimes kind of just rationalize it a little bit. I think that's really important so that you don't kind of fall into that spiral of, feeling massively rejected, I think that's key, isn't it? To be aware of it, but then also be able to kind of sound that off with other people.
And that can be hard too, can't it? Because and I'm remembering me as a kid here, and the anxiety I felt in asking for clarity about things, and how actually that in of itself can cause that feeling of criticism and rejection. So it's really hard to find the people that you feel safe enough with.
Yeah, for sure.
To ask for that clarity.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that doesn't even come until you're a well-established adult, does it? To find your or ever for some people, to kind of find that tribe, isn't it? Of people that I can really, really say, am I being an idiot here? And do I not need to take that so seriously? Or, do you understand why I feel this way?
Yeah.
And I've as an adult, and certainly since I've had my ADHD diagnosis, I've lost a few friends that I had for decades because I felt even my diagnosis, I felt that they didn't want to come on that journey with me.
Yeah.
And the RSD that created, for a few of those friendships, I've only kind of got over that 2 years later, and that's a long time to have that feeling of rejection, about one particular thing.
And that's hard, isn't it, when we're going on that journey of finding out who we are. And we do have the name for it. But actually that brings with it its own challenges.
Totally. And also, what's hard, certainly for me is feeling wonderful that I've, kind of got this diagnosis of autism and ADHD and understanding, more about RSD. But, kind of the grief that comes with that, oh God, am I always going to be over emotional? Am I always going to respond to things like that just because I know about it? If I've got that strong sense of injustice about something, or I really feel hurt about what that person may have said, or, I might have interpreted it wrong, God, am I going to still be doing that for the next 30 years?
Yeah.
And even with your support network, that's still quite a daunting thing, isn't it? I think as well, because you know how tiring it is.
And I think sometimes because you have a label for something, there's the fear that will define you, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure.
And, we are all more than our labels, whatever they are, and actually thinking back, my RSD, I didn't realise what it was, and therefore I labelled it as oversensitivity. The over that we always feel like we get as autistic ADHD individuals. You're over this, you're over that, you're over the other.
And that's really kind of, you just take that as criticism, don't you? Yeah. And I think that's hard, isn't it? Because you spend a lot of your time just questioning yourself all of the time, and you want people to love you. You know,
Yeah, of
you don't
course.
want to feel rejected when you already feel kind of you're the weird one a little bit. Yeah, that's a difficult one, and I think that knowing that you have RSD and you experience it and you know what it is, and and it's important to read more about it, and it's important to understand, and kind of whatever social media you follow to learn more about it, but just also to be kind to yourself, isn't it? Because it's huge and it's tiring, and if you are lying in bed, half a day or half a night crying because you feel sad that somebody may have said something about you or feels a certain way about you, I think, it's having those strategies, isn't it, and those tools to recover from that, um, and knowing how you can do that that's best for you as well.
Yeah, and that's very individual, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we're talking about RSD as being a neurodivergent experience, but it's beyond that, isn't it? There are those that experience it
Yeah.
due to trauma, due to the
Absolutely.
environments they have. It's not purely an
Yeah.
ADHD thing, and I think it's important to remember that
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
we are often shaped by the context and the environments that we're in, and yes, those that are neurodivergent, because of the executive function that we have, and I think it's like a dysregulation,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's the inhibition that we
Yes.
feel around those emotions.
Yeah.
It all comes
All at once.
and that's why that RSD experience is so overwhelming. But that dysregulation can be caused by other things. It's not just
Just
exclusive to ADHD and the
No.
autistic mind. And I think that's worth pointing out too.
For sure. I mean, one example of that is in my fostering role. The children, teenagers that I have or do foster, have come from a huge place of, neglect and trauma, obviously the reason they're in care. And, if you have to, remind them of, a behaviour that's unwanted, or you do kind of need to therapeutically kind of tell them off for any reason, that rejection, that RSD that you see literally happening in front of you from those children is huge, because those are children that have learned to cope with that neglect and cope with that real rejection, or people saying really terrible things to them, and watching how one comment that you could make that might hurt you or I, but has that risk of kind of crumbling that child. It's really kind of profound with the RSD with those children that have had such significant trauma. Yeah. um Hence the reason for doing everything so therapeutically is so important as well. And I think that every child and every teenager should be kind of taught therapeutically, because we don't know what trauma those children or young people are experiencing, do we, in classes, in schools and in colleges and stuff as well. It's just work colleagues,
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that as I sometimes say this about the world we live in at the moment, we need more empathy,
Yeah.
generally, about
Yeah.
other people's experiences, and actually something that the realization around RSD has taught me, and is that we don't know what's going on internally
No.
with an individual, and we maybe need to be empathetic and understanding about that internal experience, because what we see on the outside is not what we see happening on the inside.
And that's rare, isn't it? Rare that somebody's walking around with a banner, isn't it? Telling us all the things that's happening inside their minds. I think, yeah, for sure. Like you said, being, having empathy and being kind, and not assuming, just because somebody's successful or, smiling and being happy and jumping around, that actually that they're not having those feelings.
And actually, going back to the children that you were talking about, we
Yeah.
always talk about behaviour being communication as a therapist, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you stand by that as an educator as well. And when we are seeing things externally, it's about being curious, isn't it? About where's this coming from? Could it be RSD? Could it be that reaction to something that you felt personally was not going to cause a reaction like that? But actually taking a step back and thinking, oh, well, maybe they didn't receive it in that way.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's, that's a journey, isn't it, that education needs to continue to go on. And I think that at the moment in education, everyone is so overwhelmed that nobody feels that they've got time to step back and be curious and time to reflect on, why do I think that child or that young adult was behaving in that way today in my class? And somehow we need to find time to bring that back in, because that's going to make a much happier children and young people, isn't it? If you have a curious teacher or curious tutor, that asks those questions gently, and with empathy. Because at the moment, I think we're at so much risk, aren't we, of teachers being overwhelmed, teachers being overloaded, they're reacting to students' behaviours, but then those students are feeling that RSD, especially if they are neurodivergent and or have trauma as well. And we're just kind of caught in this vicious cycle, aren't we, of no time to stop, no time to think, no time to know those children, those young people really well. That even just making a comment in a different way, it wouldn't cause the RSD. I mean, I think that, I'm sure in your therapeutic, in your therapist role, you must see.
Yeah, and actually, it can be such small changes, and I'm thinking of examples that sort of I experienced when I was a kid of, you know, struggling to get in because I really didn't feel accepted, and I was anxious, and trying to get through the school gate and being late and getting a response that just reinforced that rather than the praise for doing it, and actually making it through the door. And I know that those that experience, and I'm not going to call it school refusal, emotionally based school avoidance, which I know is a term, but even that doesn't really express what it can be. And that rejection of oh, it's great to see you here again, with a sarcastic tone, which I did there.
I can imagine.
So it's such a small thing, but it makes a big difference.
But if that starts your day in that establishment that you've finally got there, and you get that one sarcastic comment the minute you've walked to the door, that sets the tone for the day, really, doesn't it? And how you're feeling and how you're going to respond to things.
I want to balance that with, I know there are many teachers, and I've experienced them in my personal life, that don't do that,
of course,
and are doing the utmost best in a difficult system. So with that in mind, I'm actually wondering, maybe we should turn our ears to ways of supporting, those that experience criticism in this way, and rejection, and maybe starting with a simple ideas in the education space.
Absolutely. I think at the moment, teachers and education leaders, they're kind of reaching out, aren't they, for ideas and strategies, because they know, the good ones know that that's what's important, isn't it, to be making sure they get those things right with their pupils.
And it's about working on that relationship, isn't it?
That's key. I think there are so many children, young people that don't feel safe and secure, because for whatever reason, and if they are struggling with RSD as well, that how they're going to learn. They don't have those basic kind of principles in place from the beginning, and I think that's what's hard. And then you chuck in your social media, you chuck in your teenagers with phones, and they're potentially receiving that RSD all day long and all night long, aren't they, from friends and peers, and kind of nasty comments that they might be receiving, and not wanting to go to school the next day. You've got catastrophe on your hands, haven't you, really?
And it's that wish to belong, isn't it? And that's almost where that RSD can come from. I'm being rejected, I'm being pushed out of the group, whatever that group may be, whether it's me at school or me in work, or whatever.
Definitely.
And that experience is hard. So I'm one thing I know that has helped me, and I'll maybe ask what's helped you in a moment, is the the kind of challenge that I do bring to myself when I have some of those thoughts.
Okay.
So maybe giving myself an example is something simple, like someone asked me to do something, and I had this little idea in my head that I'm a messy person, and they've asked me to do this, and whatever it was has been left by, I don't know, the dishwasher or something, and I've been told, you put that in the dishwasher, and what I hear and what I'm being asked is an entirely different thing. So someone will say, can you put that in the dishwasher? And I hear, can you put that in the dishwasher? You stupid person, you're such a messy old bag. Why have you not put that away earlier? And it's that inner voice, isn't it? The simple sentence that actually just was, can you put that in the dishwasher? What we hear is something completely different.
Absolutely. You know, that, everything that, you catastrophize all those things, don't you, to the worst possible things that you might have heard or thought that you heard.
And it's actually giving myself the time and space and compassion to question and go, hold on a minute. Stop that there. Oh, whoa.
That's a crazy thought.
It's like the Buckaroo game when you keep adding thoughts onto it and suddenly
no, I hear you.
And that's been really helpful. It's just the challenging and maybe a little bit of self-compassion as well.
Totally. And I think, without a doubt. And it, and every day is different, isn't it? If you're having a really positive upbeat day and you might have had a decent-ish night's sleep, then, you might not be thinking all of that stuff, and maybe just some of the stuff, isn't it, about the dishwasher, isn't it? And I think that you have to, when you are neurodivergent, you have to constantly be adapting every day, don't you? Every minute, every hour. And I think just being kind to yourself that, I might have that RSD a little bit more today because I didn't really sleep well last night. And actually I'm worried about X, Y, and Z with the family and work. So like you said, just having that compassion, that compassion of knowing today might be a little bit trickier, but actually yesterday wasn't too bad. That's
and there will be an end to today. Because I'll be able to hopefully get some sleep tonight.
Or just go to bed now.
Give up. No, not condoning that. So I think the other thing is there actually the acknowledgement there that things change and there is a fluctuation with your capacity.
And that's exhausting.
And that's actually overwhelming sometimes, being in a place where we need to do that, where we need to keep monitoring and keep understanding, and perhaps actually the acknowledgement that it's hard to make time for maybe the self-care that we need to bump up that capacity to help us to be able to deal with whatever it is that RSD throws at us.
And how do you do that with your self-care?
Well, I think, what am I good at? That's very. I think that the biggest thing for me is actually it's okay to want to be on my own. And I think because family was always such an important part when I was growing up, I kind of got this view that family needs to be everything. And I think it's that all or nothing, the one extreme to the other.
Totally get that.
And actually that isn't necessarily all the time.
So how did you work that out? Did you have to burn out loads before as a mum? Before realising that?
Absolutely. When my kids were younger, there were periods when, I probably used to go into a room and scream at the top of I did go into a room and scream at the top of my voice. And even that in of itself was a bit of self-care. Because it was getting that energy out in a safe, secure way. And, the realisation that there are certain things that I hadn't really thought I needed to help with the sort of the self-care, which was sensory processing type stuff that I didn't really understand as an autistic individual. And now I do understand that. And if I see myself being more susceptible to RSD, I go, hold on a minute. What am I not fulfilling here in terms of the needs that I have? and being curious about myself as well, rather than always thinking about someone else, which we do an awful lot as mums.
Certainly do. Right? Certainly do. Yeah.
And I can see that you're maybe nodding in agreement because it resonates.
I know, like, yeah, absolutely. Like, now I know that I have autism and ADHD, and all the tick boxes that go with that, the anxiety and the RSD, and dyspraxia chucked in, and all the rest of it. I think, how did I have 3 children in 4 years? Like, what bit of my brain thought that was? I mean, it obviously was a wonderful idea, and I have 3 amazing teenagers. But I was obviously being quite ADHD and spontaneous at the time.
I mean, I'm going to that, but I know what you mean.
To and if I'd known I was ADHD then, would I have had 3 children? Probably yes, and all at the same time. But then, yeah, absolutely. Looking back now, I'm like, wow, man, that was massive. And I wanted to have a 4th child. But instead, we've gone into fostering. And yeah, where on earth was the time to think, God, I'm being that without knowing it was RSD, God, I'm being oversensitive at the moment, or gosh, I'm responding to this in a way. I mean, I certainly remember feeling like I wanted to drive into a brick wall quite a few times.
Metaphorically speaking, with young children, yes. Probably were. Demands avoidant and all that. Oh my
gosh. And then, obviously having, 2 neurodivergent children out of that as well. And I think that, and I was trying talk therapy, and I tried to see, various, counselling and all the rest of it, but none of that worked because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what the real me was at that point. So I think I just put down most of my responses to things and being overwhelmed to being just a mum with 3 young children who probably had a bit of postnatal depression. And I look back now and thinking, I was just completely and utterly burnt out.
Yeah.
And I was, like you said, putting my 3 children first, as you do as a parent, and not even realising how overwhelmed I was.
Yeah.
And how hard I was finding stuff.
And I'm hazarding a guess here, because it's partly how I felt, that if you weren't doing everything perfectly, then there was the fear of rejection around not being the mum that you wanted to be. And the RSD, the RSD shows up in motherhood in that way, and it's so tiring.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to give you one really silly example here. When I had my first child, when I moved on to bottle feeding, I used to be obsessed with being able to have the right number of bottles ready made that you could, in the time frame that was healthy to have bottles of milk ready. And obviously I didn't know that was my autism, like trying to be really precise and exact and having everything as it was. But I felt that if I didn't do that I wasn't being the best mum that I could, because I didn't have everything prepared and ready. And then, then I would not be seen as a good mum by other people. And obviously then that was my RSD again. I look back 19 years later thinking, how mad was that I just got obsessed with making bottles because I thought somebody might think I was a bad mum? It's that was one 0.1% of all the other things that are going on as being a parent, with struggling with RSD but not realising it.
Yeah. And actually that kind of leads on to something that has helped me, is realising perfection. What is it?
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. And it doesn't matter how many times you hoover your floor or, answer your emails immediately or whatever perfection might feel like it should look like to you. So doesn't make you feel good, and it doesn't make you have good mental health, does it? Striving for.
And I think that's a helpful thing for realisation around RSD as well, isn't it? That perfection is perhaps something that is it's unattainable. So
completely,
that this concept of good enough.
People that love you and people that care about you aren't looking for you to be perfect, are they? They're not going to reject you just because you're not perfect.
And actually, I would argue that they like it the other way around. They want someone that's interesting, exciting, different.
Yep.
They don't want perfection.
No.
Because imagine living with perfection. It'd be bloody awful, wouldn't it?
Very.
You want and I was on social media yesterday and someone was suggesting what would you say to someone if they said you were weird, and I probably maybe 20 years ago I probably would have got really upset if someone said that to me now, but if someone says that to me now I've got to go, yeah, great, I am.
Yeah, I think totally, and why not, be weird and wonderful and be yourself, yeah, and I think that comes with being brave, doesn't it? Especially as a late diagnosed women as we are, you have to be brave to learn to embrace the weirdness or the imperfections.
And that's not easy.
No.
And I think we're all learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll never learn how to do it. And the concept of RSD is part of the ability to help us to do that, because it puts a framework around something perhaps that we've struggled with for a long time.
Forever. Yeah, definitely. It's goes back to what you say, isn't it? About being kind to others and being kind to yourself. I think that's something that I probably say to myself 100 times a day, as my little kind of check-in, my little reminder, like you were saying, when you challenge your thoughts, just find something just to bring it back down in your head, haven't you? Just to ground yourself again.
Well, that isn't always easy, and sometimes it won't happen. And I do think that's an important thing to acknowledge too, is that even those coping strategies, sometimes they don't always work.
No.
And that's okay.
No, that's okay. I was talking to somebody the other day who was having a really, really RSD day and kind of felt that the world was against her. And she had 4 baths in one day, because she knew that as soon as she went into her bathroom and lit her candles and her essential oils and didn't take her phone in there, that would just be, 40 minutes of self-regulation. But because it didn't kind of bring her where she felt that she needed to be after the bath, an hour later, she went back in and she did it again. And I thought that was a really awesome thing to do, rather than kind of, giving up because it didn't make her feel amazing after one bath. So isn't it? So it's trying again sometimes, which we have to do a lot of, isn't it, to work out what's going to help you on that day.
And giving yourself permission, like your friend did, to do that multiple times. And the guilt that sometimes we all experience, don't we? It's like if we're in that RSD moment, and we're kind of almost effectively thinking, well, I need to do this to get myself out of it, but that's going to take me away from the thing that I really was supposed to be doing.
For sure.
And that guilt can be, but why are we feeling that? What benefit is it's actually, we know that that's served us in the past doing those things, and that sensory experience for your friend, so it will actually ultimately help us and others around us.
And I think it's difficult, isn't it, because like you said, with the guilt, we live in this world, don't we, where we're just we feel that we're expected to be achieving X, Y and Z in a certain day, and performing, and when you're not doing that in one day, because you're either in, for me, I didn't wake up till 1:30 this afternoon because I'm completely burnt out at the moment, and I spent decades feeling guilty if I needed to do that, but I was, I finally at the age of 52 learned that if I do that I'm a better mum, I'm a better person, I'm a better friend, and sleeping for half a day once a month isn't really the end of the world. I can still do my emails tonight. They're not going away, are they? And all those other things I've got to do. And shifting. I think, now that I'm not a head teacher and being institutionalized into that, the routine of the day and early starts, that's also important as well. Learning when you can be at your best in the day and in the evenings. But, I know I'm more sensitive or, whatever in the mornings because my brain just doesn't function that time of the day. But in the evening, for example, if I'm doing work or if I had a meeting, I could, take the biggest of challenges, and I wouldn't necessarily perceive that as, being rejected or being criticised or something.
Yeah.
I think that's key as well. The when in the day or when in the week, like, my teenagers can't stand getting up in the mornings for school. But, come 10 o'clock at night, they're all downstairs, wide awake and wanting to chat, wanting to engage, wanting to be social, wanting to learn through interesting conversations. So I think that's something that I've learned as well.
Well, I think there's an element there of getting to know ourselves and what works for us around the RSD too. We can sit here and say, this has worked for me and this is working for me.
Yeah.
It's about exploring that individually, because we are all so different.
Yeah, definitely.
We all have different environments and contexts, and so that makes a difference around what works.
It does, yeah. My dad taught me a bit of that, really. My dad is definitely ADHD, and he lives on his own. And in COVID, he adapted his completely own style. He was getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning if his body felt like it, and going on walks. He would be having his dinner at lunchtime if he felt like it. And he said, "Do you know what?" He said, "It doesn't matter." He said, "I live on my own. I'm not really seeing anybody." He said, "What time I go and feed the squirrels at the park makes no difference to anybody." And for 2 years of him doing that and developing his own sync and kind of, and his rhythm into what worked for him, I think that was probably the bit that I was like, and yes, you obviously have to fit into society, and I need to get my children on time to school and college and whatnot. But actually, he helped me to understand that he was so regulated by doing that, that if I just allowed a little bit of that, feeling less guilty for getting up late one day a month or whatever it might be, and having my breakfast at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if that helps, and and he was my role model for that, then what on earth is wrong with it?
Well, it's that adapting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if that makes it as more regulated, so that we can cope with the sort of criticism, or we can question it at least.
Question it.
Then there is hope that, as you were saying, that we won't always have to deal with this constantly. And I think that's hard, because it's a difficult experience, that physical pain.
Totally. And there's not, you can't just take a paracetamol and ibuprofen to make it go away, can you? That's not how it works with RSD.
No.
I think, and that's the bit that I think other people find hard to understand, isn't it? Well, that person said that the other day and you've got over it, you're hurt. So why are you still hurting, a week in? Why hasn't that pain got away? And why haven't you brushed yourself off and got over it? And I think that's the bit that's hard sometimes, isn't it? Because then that's almost like another criticism.
Yeah. And it feeds it.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Yeah. It really does feed it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything else specific that you feel you would like to say about RSD. I think we've covered it.
That's the key bit, isn't it? Have empathy and be kind to others and to yourself. I think that's really the clear message that I'm hearing today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So hopefully we'll be back next week.
I hope so.
Take care.
Be awesome.
Bye.